And we are back here for you on Live Now from Fox. Thanks again for joining us all right here. We appreciate you continuing to watch with us here as we bring you the world of top stories, live feeds, and of course, all breaking news. And this was a big story that came out earlier today. A U.S. judge dismissed the federal criminal case accusing Donald Trump of attempting to overturn his 2020 election defeat after prosecutors moved to drop that prosecution in a second case against the president-elect, citing Justice Department policy against prosecuting a sitting president here. So I want to bring in our next guest here on Live Now from Fox, a friend here of the program, Nima Rahmani. Always great to have you here, former federal prosecutor. Thanks again for joining us. We'll talk on two big topics today. Let's first talk about Donald Trump and this. We saw that it was leaning to go this way ever since that Supreme Court decision.
Donald Trump won on November 5th and won overwhelmingly. Jack Smith had no choice but to dismiss both federal cases. And if he didn't dismiss, the defense would certainly file their motion to dismiss. And if that wasn't granted, what would happen is as soon as Donald Trump's new attorney general took over in January, Jack Smith would be fired. So what he's doing is the absolute right thing to do under long-standing Department of Justice guidance. We're talking dating back to the 70s, the Watergate era. A sitting president cannot be prosecuted. This dismissal is appropriate. Donald Trump is president-elect, and it was just a matter of time. So I'm glad that Smith is doing the right thing.
And Nima, so many people are saying, okay, when this happened, they felt, when he was first indicted on this, they felt like it was very, very political. And now that after he has won the presidency once again, it will be inaugurated in January, and now these charges go away, it kind of furthers the thought there on some people that say, look, this was so politically charged.
Well, there are a lot of people that agree with you, Mike. And Donald Trump obviously did better in 2024 than he did before he was indicted in 2020. So I think that leads to the conclusion that the American people didn't really care about these cases, or the majority of the American people didn't care. Obviously, he's a convicted felon in New York in the hush money case. He hasn't been sentenced yet, but I don't expect him to get any time there. And whether he's a convicted felon or charged under these very serious indictments, I don't think it really moved the needle. So the question is, should this prosecution have been brought in the first case? Or if it was, should prosecutors have moved quickly? I don't think they anticipated the very real possibility that Donald Trump would win. They thought they had all the time in the world. They waited years to file these cases, certainly long after the January 6th committee conducted their investigation and the impeachment was wrapped up. So I don't think the prosecution was handled particularly well. Even for those who believe that Donald Trump should have been charged, they should have moved things a lot faster. And the only real question that remains is what's going to happen in New York? Will Trump be sentenced at all, or will that case be dismissed? And when will the Fulton County case be dismissed with respect to Donald Trump? That's, of course, the state case in Georgia that Fani Willis, the district attorney there, is handling.
And I have to ask you, okay, so with these federal cases, does that put more pressure on the state cases for the judges and the prosecutors, that when they're seeing these federal cases being dropped out, does that put more pressure on them to say, okay, we might have to go down that same path?
Well, it should. And certainly Donald Trump should be dismissed from the Arizona case. The same logic applies. If a federal prosecutor can't charge a current president, certainly a state or local prosecutor shouldn't have that power. And Fani Willis botched that case for so many reasons. She hired her boyfriend, Nathan Wade. That case is on appeal. And really, the only remaining question is what happens in New York. And obviously, that case predates Donald Trump even being a candidate. That hush money scheme, the payments to Stormy Daniels, the reimbursement to Michael Cohen and so forth. Should Trump even be sentenced in that case? If he is, I expect him to receive just a fine, certainly not any time. And this is even before he was president-elect. I don't think a former president should be jailed because the charges certainly weren't serious in that case. And then what happens to the remaining co-defendants? Obviously, there's no co-defendants in the D.C. case, but there's co-defendants in the classified documents case. That case is up on appeal. And there's many co-defendants in Georgia. There's also a fake elector prosecution in Arizona, and there's investigations elsewhere. So what happens to those defendants, the Meadows, the Giulianis of the world? What happens to their cases? Do those trials move forward without Donald Trump, or are those cases dismissed as well?
Yeah, very solid points as always. Trump team tonight reacting as well, Nima, saying the American people reelected President Trump with an overwhelming mandate to make America great again. Today's decision by the DOJ ends the unconstitutional federal cases against President Trump and is a major victory for the rule of law. The American people and President Trump want an immediate end to the political weaponization of our justice system, and we look forward to the uniting of our country. That was from the Trump communications director. And lastly, here, while we're still on this subject, Nima, I think also many people might be wondering tonight if it is just a regular American that has similar charges against them brought on by the federal government. Is today almost saying that in order for that to ever be won, you have to become the president of the United States. You have to go all the way and win the presidency so these things can be dropped from you?
Well, they're very different cases, and we can kind of address them one by one. The question of the hush money scheme, that's a case that was rejected by federal prosecutors in New York. It was rejected by the previous district attorney, Cyrus Vance Jr. in Manhattan, and Alvin Bragg picked up the case. A lot of folks think it wasn't a case that should have been brought. Certainly wasn't a serious case in terms of violations. Now, Donald Trump, I will say, what he has accomplished both politically and legally is nothing short of extraordinary. This is the biggest comeback I've ever seen. And I'm talking about a criminal defendant and a politician. But his lawyers did a very good job litigating these cases through law and motion and appeal and delaying them until after the election. So I got to give credit to those lawyers. They did a masterful job on behalf of their client. Now, talking about the seriousness of the cases, I'm no fan of the fake elector scheme. I think Donald Trump should have conceded with respect to the classified documents case. I think he should have turned the documents back over to the archives. Maybe we wouldn't be put in this position. But there are a lot of people, Mike, that you mentioned, agree that had he not been a former president, he wouldn't be prosecuted for these crimes. So, the Department of Justice litigating against it is not easy. Obviously, Donald Trump had significant financial means to afford some of the best lawyers who did an outstanding job. And of course, he won politically. And as a result, all of his criminal problems go away.